everyone, welcome to Life Happens with Bahati Joyce. I'm so excited about this episode because I know we're gonna get some awesome content. I am with Khalila Mbowe. She is a social entrepreneur and she's a social innovator and impact entrepreneur. She is a lot. So I'm just gonna let her introduce herself. Khalila, you're very welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Life Happens with Bahati Joyce.
Oh yeah, how are you doing today?
I'm having one of those weird days today, but I'm all right. I'm excited about the show.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So tell the people just a
what I
little
do.
bit about yourself.
Right.
Because girl, I know you do a lot.
Just in brief, I'd say I'm a disruptor. And I'm an innovative disruptor. I love looking at things and problems and I love fascinating around, hey, how could we create solutions around these problems?
Right.
Particularly, I run a company called Unleashed Africa Social Ventures, which is a group of social enterprises working at the intersection of youth development, job creation, as well as social innovation. I work in the arts and development space, gender, social enterprise, ecosystem development, and a bunch of other things.
So what does it mean to be a Pan-Africanist?
Right, that's a good question. For me, Pan-Africanism is a lot more than, remove the borders, right? For me, my African identity is connected to the core of what it means to have this, it's a mass of land connecting a group of people with a similar, it's not a similar history because it's very nuanced, but it's a similar story from north to south, right? Even though we have very nuanced stories within that in itself, but we have a very similar thread that connects us all. And for me, it's the energy. Right, it's the energy of the continent. It's the energy of the people.
Right.
It's the energy. It's the spirit of who we were created to be as a people. I normally say that Africa bleeds in my like I feel like my blood
It
boils.
bleeds, right?
It's like my African blood boils.
I feel you.
For
I
me,
feel you, my sister.
Right. For me, it's not the borders. For me, it's everything that roots me to, And normally when I say to the land, people think it's woo ha. It's not. Everything that roots us to when God created. And put us right here.
That's powerful.
What did he create us to be?
As Africans, as a people.
Right, as a people, and that's what connects me.
Wow.
Right, and that's what Pan-Africanism means to me. Right?
Powerful, going back to the original purpose and intent of God for this continent.
Yeah.
Amazing. But today I want to talk about who is Khalila Mbowe,
Right.
AKA Kels.
I'd like to find that out too.
Oh,
Right.
we're going to go there today.
Right.
Give us a little bit of history about, who are you? What's your story?
Right, that's a deep question, right? I normally say I'm still trying to I'm still on the road to discover my story.
Right.
But my history, I can give you a history of, this is where I was born, Tanzanian, went to school here. I can give you that history, right? But I normally love to, I think about my history in terms of my own personal transformation as a person, right? So I'm a person who, since I was really small, I loved the continent, right? I loved thinking about ways to transform things. Always. I remember I'd see people on the streets and I'd tell my mom, when I grow up, I'm gonna find a way to get them out. And of course she'd be perplexed. Sometimes she would try to whoop the, common sense out of me, into me, what are you talking about? And I used to love dance and art. I used to tell her, Mom, I see things in color. She used to think I was completely bonkers. And I've always been in love. As a kid, I was always in love with coming up with different things, right? But then, growing up, I got to a point right before my teenage years, I hated being African. I hated everything. That changed, that flipped very fast. Okay. When I was smaller, you'd ask me, what do you want to do? And I didn't have a one thing. I had a list of 17 things I wanted to be.
Wow.
And right now, I have a list of 40 different ventures I want to do before I'm 35. No, I'm serious.
Yeah, girl.
I'm serious. But I wanted to do so many things, and they were all anchored around, let's create solutions, right? And like I said, I got to a point where I hated being African. I remember all I wanted to do was to leave this continent.
Hey, it's such a strong word.
I use that. It was a low thing. It was a loathing. It was deep, and my energy for Africa was if you want that person who was completely pessimistic about the continent at that point, do not go back to my Facebook stories. You'll probably find that.
Wow.
I would not talk about this continent without a completely negative, connector between my sentences, 100%. And because growing up, listen, this is what I was saying. You hear in the media, you're hearing about corrupt politicians. Every single time I was with adults, they would talk about how bad things were.
Right.
Whether it's in school, it's in the streets. You walk down the streets, you see poverty. In my books, I am looking at gold, and I was so confused as a child.
Wow.
And I thought, then we're just stupid.
Wow.
I thought we're stupid people because
you believe that the narrative that was being spoken is like, no, actually we just.
I was like, then, because in my mind, I'm like, then
it must be true.
There is no way that we could have all this and be in this state. Then we just must be stupid. I don't think I'm stupid. I don't belong here.
Wow.
I don't belong here. And because even at that time, I remember having conversations with people. And when as a kid, all my friends were always much older than me, right? I'd have conversations with people and I'd say things and I'd get bullied for it. I'd get bullied, and I learned very early on to subdue myself.
You were bullied?
Oh my, you have no idea.
You.
Oh my God. Yes.
This confident woman that you are now.
And I tell people that I'm still getting over most of those things now.
Wow.
Right? The only reason, there are a lot of things I haven't done till this date. And probably the reason I haven't done them is I'm still suffering from those ghosts of the past.
But when people look at you, you're such a strong and resilient woman.
Right, because that was a journey, right?
Right.
That was a journey. And when people say strong, resilient, I'm like, yes, I'm strong and resilient, but there's still a part of me, a huge part of me, that is completely hidden behind these different experiences I've had as a kid. And I tell a lot of people will say something to a child, and like, don't tell them that. Right. And they'll say, oh, that's a child. I'm like, you are instilling a thought in an African king and an African queen about who they are at a young age. Right. And you don't know what you are cutting down. It's like a banana tree, or it's like a tree. You're cutting it down just when it's starting, the shoots are starting to come up. Yeah. That's when you need to water it and tell it, this is who you are.
But this is how we grew up, right? Okay.
Right.
So for the most part, you find that not only is the African narrative skewed from the outside, but the stories we're telling about ourselves. For example, growing up in a typical African home, right? If a kid takes a, radio, begins to work on it, pulls out the wires, and this kid is just curious.
Right.
You're stupid. What are you doing? That's expensive. Even if you're in my notion copy, it's things like that.
I mean, and when somebody says that, like, I understand where you're coming from, right? Because there's that understanding, and we have to be empathetic about where we come from. Right. Because most of the times we talk about parents like, oh, it's the parents' fault. I'm like, they didn't know any better. They didn't know any better. And right now, for example, we have a lot of youth development projects where you're talking about developing the youth and developing the young minds. Parents need help too. Ooh. The parents need help.
We need the parent development program.
Absolutely. There's one of our innovations, Rise Up, and when we're doing market research, we didn't just talk to the youth. We called in parents in. I had a focus group with the parents.
That's good.
People are talking about how parents were the ones who were making young girls, because we're having focus groups with girls, and they're talking about how their parents were the reasons that most of them were felt negative about themselves, did not believe in themselves. As you see, we call the parents. We call the parents, and believe it or not, 90% of the parents that showed up were men.
What?
They showed up in the room because we're telling them that there's we have solutions. Let's talk about solutions of how you can bring up confident children. These men were confused about how to do it. And these are not young men. Yeah. I had people in that room from 30 to 65. At a point, I had a 53-year-old man cry and say that, because the questions were, when your daughter comes to you and says and asks you, hey, Dad, I want an opportunity, or I want to do this, or probably shares her dream with you, what is your go-to? And he said, and he had 3 daughters, and he said every single time one of them would come to me with something, kwanza, nitamtukana, I will abuse them, right? Who do you think you are? You cannot do that. Go outside, find a solution elsewhere. Yeah. Who do you think I am? I have other things on my mind. And they all agreed. And he said, simply because I have no idea what else to tell her. Wow. Because the moment I tell her that I don't know, that immediately diminishes the way she looks at me as a father. So I have no idea what to tell her. So then, moja kwa moja, it tells you, my question was, if we could give you a solution something that could help you raise your child, would you go for it? They were all like, give it to us right now.
Wow.
Because in the African sense, as a man, as the father of a house,
Yeah.
you can have your child thinking my father doesn't know.
Yeah.
But the moment you send your daughter out there, and he said, I know when she goes out there, there are sharks and lions and other people who will lie to her. But what option do I have?
That is so profound. We're gonna take a break. I want us to come back on that. I have a personal story with that actually.
Yeah.
We're talking about, who we are as Africans, our confidence, particularly you mentioned, the young African girls, and we're gonna touch a bit more on that, women leadership. So deep stuff. We're here on Life Happens with Bahati Joyce, and we are learning so much about Pan-Africanism, women and leadership, and this young generation that we are raising. So stay tuned with us, and we will be right back. To Life Happens with Bahati Joyce. I'm here with Khalila Mbowe, also known as Kels. She is a social innovator. She is an impact entrepreneur. She is a mover and a shaker. And today she's telling us about her journey being an African entrepreneur, a Pan-Africanist. She's so passionate about this continent, but also being a woman leader. So Kels, thank you so much for sharing. This is so deep and it's so profound. You know what? I relate with this in the sense of personally my journey, my story. So when I was about 10 years old, I loved art and creativity. I used to take cardboard boxes and I would make shoes out of them. And you would be able to walk with them. I would take stones and tapes. I was tearing clothes and jeans way before they became fashionable. And I would get in trouble for it. I was making a guitar out of cardboard box and I would put like rubber bands and they would be a different, tightness so that they create sound, things like that. So I remember one day my dad comes home and he's like, okay, he sits us down and he's like, what do you all want to be when you grow up? So I was like, this is my moment. Because most Africans, Dad, don't really do that. Those are not conversations you have when you're young. Those are conversations you have at university. So I tell my dad, I want to be an artist. I was so excited because I never imagined that he would have asked me this question.
Your poor dad.
And and I don't say this in any way, to put him in the wrong light. No, actually, he was just very honest with me. And he was like, you'll starve.
Right.
Where are you going to sell that idea? How are you going to make money in this continent, So he wasn't really crushing my dream, although it did. It killed that part of me that loved art and creativity. But the important thing is that now my dad affirmed something in me.
Right.
And he said, you know what, you're so good at sciences, and I think that you're so smart. Why don't you be a doctor? My journey in health started from there.
Right.
But this creativity and this thing that was in me was kind of denied because we were told that is not marketable in Africa.
Right.
So later on, I came to discover, something else and kind of that unlocked that in me. But it's so important in what you're saying about not just educating the young people, young girls, but educating the especially the fathers, the parents, but especially the fathers, because
the community.
Yes, and that affirmation in who we are. So take me back to your story. How did you transition from one being this child who was bullied to being the confident person that you are today, and also being this person who now hated Africa because of the narrative that was being spoken over and over and over, to being the passionate person that you are today about Africa?
So long story short, I finally went to study, it was in Malaysia, and I was there for a few years. I normally say the people that surround you, the choices that you make, are the ones of the people who surround you are the ones that are going to either open the door to what is your purpose or keep you shut down. Now, even though I got to a point where I hated Africa, there was still a part of me that bled for it.
Right.
So long story short, I got back to TZ, and the people who are around me, I happened to be around people who were passionate about Tanzania. They were passionate about development. Being in Malaysia and going to class and people arguing with me that Tanzania is a village in Africa. So me having to defend Africa from that end. I am like, no, South Africa is not our capital city. People will think we joke. It's not a joke. I remember in media and history, our professor, and his name was Indrajit. And he said, in 1961, he showed us pictures of Malaysia in 1961. We were, I and 2 other Tanzanians were the only Africans in that class ever.
Interesting.
Actually, 3 other Tanzanians, there were 4 of us. And they showed us pictures of Tanzania in 1961, pictures of Malaysia in 1961. And then we went to, and he showed me pictures of 2008. And the contrast, and he asked, what happened? Whew.
You were like,
hold
me back,
because everybody just, the contrast, it's sharp, because it's like, we actually came to learn from East Africa.
Wow.
Right? Because at that point, you were people that we looked up to.
Right.
What happened?
So it wasn't a moment of anger for you, it was more of a realization.
Yeah, it brings you to leadership. Right. Just now starting to wanting to unpack where the source of my anger is. The source of my anger was the narrative. What is the source of the narrative? What is the source behind the thinking process that perpetuates the narrative? So it made me curious, and I've always been curious. So that curiosity then just easily, I don't want to say easily, but started the journey towards coming back. Like most of the things that most of the things that connected the things that I was unhappy about, anchored on leadership, perception, mindset.
Wow. So let's touch now on leadership because you are a leader, especially as a woman. I want to go into your journey and your perspective on leadership. You said a lot of these things now you realized anchored around us needing a different kind of leadership. So what's your understanding of leadership? Where are we at as Africans in terms of leadership?
I mean, that's a big question, right? That's there are dialogues and conferences and write-ups and debates about African leadership.
Right.
This is what I think, right? And I'll break it down into generations, right?
Okay.
Right post-colonialism, we had a group of people who were so divided, right? Standing up for leadership positions within those divisions. So if you take me out of if you were in a room and this room was boxed up, and you take me out of one box because I excelled in that box, and then you make me the queen over all the people who were in all the other boxes, if we remove now all the borders, and say, okay, now you're the leader. Right. I can only lead from my own perception within that box. I can only lead within the paradigms that I have been accustomed to, right? And so you have people who are looking up to the colonial masters and thinking of that as leadership. Because remember, most of the people who became leaders post-colonialism, they were not inclined in what Africa was before.
But then when you say that, I wonder, because most of those people, we recognize them as freedom fighters.
I mean, so then again, the African story is very skewed. I might get in trouble for saying this, but that's the fact. Yeah. Most of our history was not written by Africans. Most of our history, even history books, was written by the British, for the British. You learned about an apple, not necessarily because a Tanzanian brought it was an apple, because it was a British curriculum for Tanzania. And most of our education was very much made with we talked about the Eurocentrism, right? But then at the end of the day, just even breaking leadership back into generations, right? That we had this generation of leaders. And then we had the next generation of leaders who saw, because you only learn from what you see.
From, you know.
Yeah, so you only learn from that. But a leader is somebody who sees possibilities, right? And not just possibilities for themselves. They see possibilities for the whole and put themselves in a place where they can lead or show the other people the possibilities. A leader, all leaders all we need in Africa are leaders who can lead with vision, being able to see this is where we need to be, but also virtue, right? Really being able to be ethical, have integrity, and ground us down in who we are as a people, right? And then also there is value, being able to build value and generate value. And that what I spoke about right now is called a V3 model of leadership. And I love this V3 model of leadership as something I learned in my MBA program at the African Leadership University.
Right.
I mean, we can talk about this model a lot, right? And dissect it. There's a lot to be spoken about, but then you really want to find that intersection. But then what I was coming to is it's a skill that needs to be honed.
Okay.
So we need a lot more programs like this,
Right.
actually breeding leaders before we get people vying for leadership positions, especially, and I want to say government, but it's also private sector. Because a lot of times in private sector, you have to go through some sort of, educational program.
Right.
Companies have, you have an onboarding program. But then with other leadership spaces, so if we're talking about the public space, the civic space, right? We need to be a lot more intentional about, okay, these are the skills this person needs. You need to go through some sort of skill building program.
Right.
And then we cannot start it from the point where somebody says, oh, I'm going to run for this position. Start it in schools.
Make it a program in schools.
Start it in homes. We have mass communication campaigns about wearing protection. We need to have mass communication campaigns about leadership. We need to have mass communication campaigns about narrative.
Right.
Because those are the things that instill mindsets that will build this continent. And we cannot only have them for the privileged few who happen to be curious enough to find those programs because that's how people like me did it. I never had it handed to me, oh, go to this program. I had to fight tooth and nail to be in the spaces that I now am.
I mean, that's really, really good stuff. And I can relate so much with that, the passion for leadership. I want to bring it home a little bit in two ways. One, let's talk about African leadership as it is. I know there's so many narratives, but I want to go back to where you were, the narrative that you had received.
Yeah.
It's the same narrative we've heard over and over again. African leaders are corrupt. African leaders are this and that. So I want to talk about the narrative that we want to see now and the narrative that is right now, or rather, let's evaluate where we are as a continent in terms of our leaders. That's one. And then I want to go into women in leadership. So let's start with African leaders in general.
Yeah.
Number one, what do you think, or where do you think we're at in terms of African leadership collectively? And then where do we need to go?
I think we're in a transition.
Okay.
Right? I feel like Africa is in a deep transition. We're in that space where people are realizing that, hey, we can do better.
Something's got to change.
Right? We can do better. And it's not, something's got to change, and we can do better. Wow. We have a lot more people stepping up and realizing, not just internally, but speaking out and having more platforms like this. And these platforms that we have, for example, a Life Happens with Bahati Joyce.
Right.
Your platform was not started by somebody who came from abroad and said you should start it. No. You started it yourself.
Right.
It was your own intuition. It was out of your own inhibition to say that this needs to happen, right? And we have a lot more of that happening. So I fully believe we're in a transition. However, right, that transition needs to happen faster. And the only way that transition happens faster is to make sure that other people who are not privileged to go on YouTube and watch Life Happens with Bahati Joyce actually get into hearing these conversations and having these conversations. Right. So what needs to happen, right? If you're watching this show and you're inspired, have a conversation about another person with what inspired you here.
Wow.
Have a conversation
That's
with your
good.
maid. Tell the maid, inspire the maid to have a conversation with her parents when it comes back home. It needs to be a domino effect.
I love it.
Because every single person, every single one of us has the responsibility to change this narrative. If you're watching this, go and tell somebody.
Right.
And make sure that they tell somebody. And don't just pick somebody to tell somebody, oh, I need to have a conversation with this type of people. No. We are all one people.
Right.
Have a conversation with the person washing your car.
Right.
Have a conversation in the dala. Have a conversation. We need to go out as if we're going to war.
Right. And change the narrative.
Absolutely.
Make it our responsibility.
Right.
You know, Kels, you've really captured my vision and my heart for this.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we are working on it and we're going to do, Life Happens isn't a TV show, because there's no way you can tell, you know, the African stories or tell African stories by just doing a TV show. It's a movement. And this is what we're doing, where it now becomes Life Happens with Khalila Mbowe, because now you take control of that narrative and you take control, you know, making life happen is about, I take control of the narrative and I change it and I direct it. So we want to create a platform that now will share stories of everyday people. I want to get a boda, get his story, get him talking, get someone who's in politics, get them talking. We all need to collectively change our narrative, especially when it comes to leadership and who we are as people. All right, so now looking specifically as you as a woman leader, I want to go there. What has been just your journey as a woman in the space of leadership? Because that's a thing that we need to talk about.
Right. I think I'm still on that journey.
Okay.
It's been a journey of self-discovery. It's been a journey of self-acceptance. It's been a journey of self-forgiveness, a lot of it. It's been a journey of healing. It's been a journey of consistent I normally say self-discovery and self-recovery, right? And for me, people will say, oh, it's learning to unlearn. I'm like, yeah, there is that, but it's always just being able to, because I normally say there's a Kells, and my friends will laugh at this. I say they're I think in different dimensions of Kelses, right? So I think of the Kells in 2050, I think of the Kells in 2030, I think of the Kells in 2025. I think about the Kells in 2023, and then there's Kells 2021. So whenever something happens and I'm like, okay, Kells 2050, what would you do here?
Right, interesting.
What would you do here? But then it's been a journey to get there, where I've realized that I am my own support system first and foremost.
Wow.
That there are different versions of you as a person that need to hold you up. And those are not just anchored in, oh, this is my vision now and this is what I want to be. Those are anchored on all the sacrifices that were made to get you to where you are. And you need to realize that you are part of a journey that is not about you.
That it's not about you.
It is about the collective. So for me, it got to a point where and I say that I'm still on that journey of discovering that, boo-boo, you need to be fierce. Because your vision, your story is not about you. At the end of the day, you're going to die and leave something behind. What do you want to leave behind? When I was a kid, I used to talk about legacy. From a very young age. I used to love that word. And maybe I didn't speak about it openly. I spoke about it to a few people who laughed at me, and then I stopped talking about it. But nowadays, I'm confident about to talk about it. Legacy. What do I want to leave behind? I want to leave behind, and I say, I want to leave behind having touched millions. I don't want to be nimetengeneza watu wachache. No. I want to be a trillionaire. I want to be wealthy.
Yes,
like I want to be wealthy.
Generational wealth.
Yani, not just kusema kwamba, oh, I'm wealthy kwenye hela. I want to be wealthy in terms of impact. Right. And it's not just even kwamba wealth, oh, najulikana ndio. That comes with the territory. But being able to say that we actually caused a shift. I want to leave things better than I found them. And that's always been my drive, right?
Amen to that.
Especially in times when I am down. I've been told that I can make it very early on when I started because I'm female. Somebody told me that to my face. And the first thing I launched on Unleashed Africa was Unleashed Academy for Creative Arts and Leadership. So it's in the creative arts. So even though in the past I was told that I'd never make it in creativity, even as a kid, I relate to your story. I finally ended up, I was like, oh, if this is going to change on this continent, and we're going to make a space for people like me, I'm going to create it. But I was told that I'd never make it because I'm female, because I'm young, and because I was a female, I'm young, and I'm African.
Wow.
So I was told, the advice I was given was you need to either find a Caucasian partner or at least marry a white person, a white man. So whenever I want to give up hope, whenever I want to stop, I always realize that the difference between who I am and the actualization of my vision is my personal development.
Ooh, that's so good.
That's definitely always, and normally when I say, if anything is going bad in my life, right, ask me, when was the last time I focused on personal development as a person? It doesn't come, sio kuwezeshwa, this kuwezeshwa nonsense. Not that it's nonsense, but then it cannot be that, oh, sijafanikiwa kwa sijawezeshwa. There are things that you can do for you.
For yourself,
right?
From within.
So for me, it's the reading, it's the constant learning, it's the fellowship programs, it's the digging, it's the fishing out conversations, looking for challenges, and also challenging the things that I believe to myself to be true.
Wow.
And always seeking to be a better version of myself. Every single day I say, if I've gone to bed without finding something that makes me a better version of me, and I go to bed the same way I woke up, there's a problem.
So Khalila, just as we wrap up and finish up, I want to know what challenges you faced as a woman,
Right.
especially being an influencer and the powerful leader that you are. But also I want to touch a bit, coming back home to now, we have a woman leader in the country, Her Excellency, woo, Samia Suluhu Hassan. So let's touch a bit about that. What does it mean for us as a nation? What impact does that have, and where is that heading? So if we could just touch on those two things.
So I'm going to start with the last question. So the fact that we have, I mean, when she was sworn in, I think many of us cried. And we all said we never thought we'd see that in our lifetime. Like, I didn't think I would see that in my daughter's lifetime. Unless I ran for presidency, but
that's an option.
Let's say that. What that did is it introduced a different story.
Right.
It completely changed the paradigm. It completely flipped the page. So right now, it's not that girls didn't dream before, they dreamt. But right now, there's an added confidence. There's an air of, like who you, right? I can be somebody like this. Because before, even with I told you the program that we did, we went out and interviewed over 300 girls. What are your dreams? Nobody said to be president. But now you can say my dreams to be president.
My sister used to say that. When she was younger, they would ask her, what do you want to be? And she'd say, I want to be the president. They told her, dream something else.
Right, precisely. I used to say I want to be the president of Africa. That's what I used to say as a kid. And of course, people would laugh at it. Like, you're like, Kwanzaa.
How?
It is, and it's not even, it's like a child's dream.
Right.
It is not a child's dream anymore. It's reality.
She's made it a reality.
It's reality, right? It is possible. And one of the things that I have to say is, just kudos to Tanzania. Right. I do know that that transition might not have been as easy as it was. Yes. But the fact of the matter is, even the people who surrounded her, we're grateful. However, people will talk about our political system, however they want to talk about it, but we didn't have unrest. It happened. Yes. It was one of the most peaceful transitions ever seen in this particular decade. Because people are waiting for issues.
What's going to happen? What's going to happen?
So we really have to give it to the country and even the leaders in place, whether we agree with many of them or not. Right. We're grateful that it happened, and we're grateful for the fact that she stood, and she didn't just stand meekly. She stood firmly. She's here, and she's saying, I am here, and you shall know that I am here.
So, aliyosimama pani
rahisi. So, yes.
Kwenye maombilio ya mwanamke.
Said,
this is the president in the form of a woman.
Don't get it twisted. She's not a female president. She's a president. Do we say male president? No. Do we say male? No. She's the president. Is she a hapo? Yeah. So what that's done is it's brought a different air of confidence to the dreams that were being dreamt. Wow. That I don't, because there's a point where when you talked about women making it, the whole kudanga. Like you need a sponsor. You need a man.
You need a sponsor.
But right now, I'm like, Boo, you could be president.
Right. And even the narrative around us changed. Women have taken over the country.
So, and the great thing about that is a woman taking over the country does not mean she'll destroy it.
Right.
Whenever we think about a woman leading something, it's more about not just the nurturing, but she will actually direct it. There's direction. There's growth. There's birth that happens. You conceive new things. You can conceive new value. So V3.
Amazing. Right. And I have to give it to our late president, Hayat Magufuli, for even believing in her, because she's the first female vice president we've ever had. But I also have to give it, like you're saying, to us as a people, our leaders, for doing such a smooth transition. Right. So just getting into that space where we have the first female vice president and now the first female president, amazing. Right. So now back
to the first question. The number one challenge I've always had is self-doubt. Always, like till today, self-doubt. It's an inferiority complex. It's a the fact of the matter is, people will say anything and everything they want to say about you externally, right? But if within you're not anchored to just the core of who you are, those things will shake you.
How have you handled that space, those challenges? Share with them one thing.
And I take it to self-doubt because a lot of time can answer this talking about, huyu kasema, huyu anafanya, we should do this, the things should change. No, the number one thing that needs to change, people think it's cliche, is you. Wow. I mean, for me, my investment, my biggest investment in Africa is an investment in myself. 100%.
Wow.
The biggest investment I've ever made on any dream I have is an investment on me. Because there's a me who was there 5 years ago. When I look at her, I laugh. I'm like, you're so stupid. Thank God you realized yeah. Because even there's some things that I might have said last year that don't make sense today. But then why would I say that? It's because I've made a deliberate effort and a deliberate promise to myself to say there is no way I can remain the same.
I gotta change.
There is no, I might be saying something. The things that I'm saying right now, I might get to a different place of realization and say, okay, that was, amateur thinking. Let's evolve, let's grow higher, right? Because there is always the universe as it's created by God is full of vast knowledge and wisdom. There is never a full stop. So the biggest investment you can make on any dream that you have is an investment on yourself. We're talking, people would ask, how? I ask people the kind of wisdom that is there in books.
Right. Just the knowledge.
Let's start there. There is that. And it's not just about going back to school. It's books. When you go online, look for personal development. Shows like this. Look for shows like this. And sometimes people will say that, I can't watch a show like that and not sleep. Then put earphones, do it when you're on the bus and you're doing something. Make sure, do it while you're running. Keep yourself awake because you need that. Yeah. You need to feed your soul that. Personal development is the hardest thing to do. Why? Because it's outside our comfort zone. Because what you're saying is you're arguing with yourself, saying that you're wrong and there's got to be a different. Yani ni kwamba unabishana na wewe mwenyewe. And most of the times what we love to do, we love to say that we're right. I'm right, I'm correct.
You want someone to massage your ego and be
and who are the best people to massage our egos? Ourselves. So with personal development, you're saying, boo-boo, you don't know nothing.
Honey, you gotta change.
You might know something, but you could know better.
Right.
Do better. You're constantly telling yourself, do better. And every time you say, do better. So the biggest investment you have on yourself is you. So when personal development is hard, when you're listening to this show and you're like, jamani, nataka kumtumia mtu, but will they watch? They like udaku.
Well, they like udaku.
But quick question, what does Udaku feed your vision? What does it feed your soul? After you've watched Udaku, how do you feel? Do you go to bed thinking I've done something today? Yes, I'm fierce, I'm a better version of myself. Or do you go to bed thinking about the other person? But those are the things you should be instilling in yourself. And it looks very different from other people. It could be reading. It could be having different conversations. It could be looking at the friends that surround you and saying deuces.
I need to change the friends around me.
Completely. Sometimes it's not even just one or two friends. Ni wote. The BFFs tell them we will meet next year. Yes, completely.
But just developing yourself.
Absolutely. And making sure, and making sure that the things around you, because then practically it could be books, it could be the people around you, it could be, whatever form of shows and content that you watch. Nakadhalika, there are so many other aspects. So Life with Bahati Joyce is definitely a great place to start.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Love it. Thank you so much, Kels. It's been such a powerful session. We've been learning about African leadership. We've been learning about women leadership. We've been learning about personal development and just investing in yourself. And that's really how we're going to invest in the future of Africa, in the future of any society, so to speak. So thank you so much, Kels. That was amazing. And that's what we do here on Life Happens with Bahati Joyce. As she said it, you need to be watching this show. You need to be telling your friends to be watching this show, because this is where we're sharing our stories, changing our narrative. This is where we're getting actual content that can change the next generation. So stay tuned with us, and we will be with you next time.